So this morning we're going to talk about Matthew 24, verses 14 through 30. It's the parable of the bags of gold. A parable of you might know it as the parable of the talents in the King James. The terms are synonymous with objects worth wealth. Mentioned in two places. We'll talk about the second one first, and then we'll get back to Matthew. So, Luke, chapter 19, verses 11 through 27. Context is everything, right? Luke lists Christ giving this parable 6 days before Matthew. He said it twice. It brackets, along with several other parables and lessons that Christ wanted to give the audience and the disciples just before the crucifixion, as his last words and lessons. So in Luke, this is the moment where he goes to the house of Zacchaeus and he preaches all day, all night, and he gives a list of parables to the assembled people in the home. Then immediately after, he tells the disciples, go to Jerusalem, find the guy with the donkey. That's where I'm going to hang out, and that's where we're going to have the Passover meal. That's Luke in context. Absolutely no difference in the wording of the parable between Luke and Matthew. Just two different times. If Christ says something more than once, it might be worth looking at. And so he says it again in Matthew. This time, it is when he and the disciples are on the Mount of Olives. And this would be the day prior to Gethsemane. And it's the last moments he's going to have with the disciples. And you have to go all the way back to Matthew 24 to get the context of what's going on in the life of Christ right now. He's just finished teaching, and the apostles come to him and they say, what's all that mean? And they're still in the temple. And he says, you see this when he says, you see this temple? Tear it down in 3 days, I'll rebuild it. And nobody understands what he means in relation to the resurrection. And he walks them to the Mount of Olives, and they are actually sitting on one of the walls between the steps and the terraces. And he can see Jerusalem, and you can clearly see the temple from there. And he gives them some words on the temple. He foretells a lot of what is going to happen to the Jewish community and the state of Israel in the near future, probably for the next 70 years, which encompasses that first 70 years of the church. And then he runs through a stream of parables for them. These are his last words that he can have with them. And they are all talking about a Lord, a leader, a man, a business owner, a father figure, leaving people in charge of things and coming back later to check their work. So Matthew 25 starts out with the parable of the 10 virgins, the bridegroom coming to the bride, it's late for the wedding, all those things, and how we're supposed to act. And what happens, if the Lord is late? And the answer is you stand fast. He goes through the sheep and the goats, telling them about the separation to come when he returns. And then he gets to the parable of the bags of gold. I might have just reversed those. He does the 10 virgins, parable of the bags of gold, and then he does sheep and the goats. Better closeout for his final words to the apostles on what happens now. None of them know it's his last day with them. Tonight he will be taken. The next day he will be systematically tortured and paraded through the state and then taken and crucified. And none of them know this. But Christ knows. And he's going to talk to the Father about it that evening. Best example of that is in John. So, that's your context. Matthew 24, verses 14 through 30. You like that small text? I tried to get it all on one slide. So I'll read it for you. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of the servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever will be given more, for whoever has will be given more, and they will have abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And that's from the NIV. What? You voting for the NIV?
Chapter 25, I think.
Did I fail to mention chapter 25?
Well, it says 24 up there.
Yeah. So I reveal my bias and incompetence. I'm not a fan of chapters and verses. You guys hear me say that a whole lot.
I assumed there was other confusion, so
No.
You know I can't keep quiet.
Right? Good on you.
Because Dwayne's not in here, so...
I would come fix it, but now I just realized I would have to fix 2 slides and create a break-in contextual discussion, and we're not willing to do that. So, what is this parable about? I can tell you what it's not about. It's not about money. But that use of this parable is creeping into the institution of church, uppercase C, all throughout the world, where men who are becoming ministers, preachers, prophets, whatever they want to call themselves, and are telling their congregation that this is proof text for that if you give me money, God will give you more. If anyone ever preaches that to you, just walk right up and slap them, open-handed, as hard as you can. Hopefully it rocks their skull in Christian love, and you can reboot them. Because it's not, that is a twist and a perversion of Scripture. Okay? So I know what it's not. So what's left? What's left in the body of the text?
I always thought more of talents, because I guess King James uses talents.
King James does use talent. But a talent of gold is the...
I'm thinking talents in terms of money.
Oh, okay. And that's an easy English language translation. It's an impossible translation for Greek and Hebrew.
It just gives you a different perspective if you're not looking at it as money.
Yeah.
Because God gives us all gifts. Some come easier and are just very prominent. And others you can develop.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Christ is clearly talking about something that the Lord has given someone to use for a purpose. And for Christ there is only one purpose, right? The church. And so I don't mind the analogy. I think it's apt. But a talent back then was only money. It was a measure of weight, but if you talked to somebody about a talent of gold, they knew exactly what you were talking about. For us, it'd be a stack of dollar bills. A big stack. It's an enormous amount of money. So if we are in general agreement then that this is about usage of things given or provided for the purpose of the kingdom, as Christ would have called it.
I think it's addressing your responsibility more than anything.
Wait for the microphone, please.
Wow. Mr. Microphone. Yeah, the millions of followers that we have online are desperate to hear your words.
I think it's addressing responsibility more than anything.
Okay? I agree. Keep it in context. What are the last things Christ has to tell the disciples? And who are they? We can use them as a part of our understanding of the parable. Who he talks to and when about what are all equally important. And in this case, the disciples heard it twice. They hear it in the room in the house of Zacchaeus, and Christ pulls it forward again now as one of the final things he is going to tell them. What is their purpose for Christ's life and mission? They're the people that he directly thanks the Father for giving him in the garden. And he says their purpose was to learn from me and learn to be like me for you. And he thanks God for them. He tells God, thank you for allowing me to protect them. Please continue to guide, guard, and direct them when I go. And so he's telling the future leaders of his kingdom, who are tasked with the responsibility and have already executed it twice, to go out and teach. And so the weight is upon them. They have this burden of ownership for everything Christ has taught them, to pass it on. What if they'd just gone and sat in a circle somewhere in the temple and did nothing? Now, I'm not sure that was possible for them. I'm not saying that it could have been. I think the Spirit was driving some of them forward. But they could have chosen to do nothing. They didn't. So if you are going to carry someone's message, how should you carry it? Have we played the communication game before?
So, question, the person with one talent who buried it and did nothing makes me think of us sitting in our church building doing nothing. For hiding the message. Is that what you're looking at?
It could be. We can discuss that. I would put one caveat on that, though, if we're going to transition to a minor conversation about each of the three people and what they did with their gold that was given to them. So first, we'll talk about him in reverse order. The guy with one bag of gold who does absolutely nothing. Now, if we're going to equate that person to us sitting here, then it's a person who attends only at what they have been taught is the prescribed and required time, never darkens the door at any other time, never provides any love, support, and assistance to anyone else in the church or the world at large. That's, I think, who they would be talking about. Because plenty of us do work for the church, and that's beautiful. That is the entirety, with few exceptions, of what the first century church did. It provided an example to the community by taking care of itself and the people in it. And as they grew strength and they grew numbers and they were able to do more, they began to move out into the community. Particularly to those things that we were told to do, which were disadvantaged groups of people, widows, orphans, people who can't care for themselves or others. So the first person, sir.
It makes me think of all the organizations that we have or may have been a part of. And if you really think about those organizations, you have that select few that are the doers. You've got that select few that just want to be associated with the organization. Then you got the middle ground, some that might do a little bit. And I think you really think about that, that also applies to our service to God. Are we going to follow what he has commanded us to do? Are we going to be associated as a Christian? Or are we going to stand the middle ground and be lukewarm, so to speak?
Yeah, there's a whole letter on a group of Christians who were doing that. the letter to the Laodiceans. But, yes, there are millions of groups and organizations in the country you can be a part of. More in the world. Some of them do better at others. I'll tell you, a group I really like are the Shriners. Those guys build hospitals. They're not just the dudes running around in your local parade on golf carts. That's phenomenal work. And I support them in it. And so we also should never be ashamed or afraid or hesitant to praise those who are doing good things. It doesn't have to just be from within us. Because that's just being mean. So when you see organizations that do well, thank them. Congratulate them. Encourage them to do likewise. And then continue to stand amongst them as an example of Christ. So, yeah, we're supposed to. We're supposed to want to. That's part of our maturity in Christ, right? Getting past ourselves, understanding what Christ wants, accepting that as what we want, and then doing that. First guy never learned that. What happens? He gets ejected into the void, is the direct translations that you would see. The utter darkness, the absence, which later on in Revelation we get a little more defined. What he is rejected from the presence of God. Wailing and gnashing of teeth is always a great term that the Lord uses for that. What happens to you when you realize what has been done to you because of your own actions? And there's nothing to do but scream into the darkness. So the second guy, Mr. Three Talents, what'd he do? He does well. He takes the gifts he's given, multiplies them for his master, and returns them when they're due. No issues with his performance. God gave him as much as he could bear to be over, and he bore it, and he shepherded it, and he used it to produce an increase for the Lord. Now, funny point. Notice that the words for the reward for the person with 3 are exactly the same as the reward for the person with 5. God doesn't challenge you to do more than he has called you to do. And he doesn't evaluate you against anyone else. You are evaluated against your relationship with him and your individual performance. And evaluation is probably a bad term, but there it is. Certainly in this parable, they're being evaluated based on their performance. So the reward is the same. Right? I will place many things under you now that you've gained some strength and understanding and knowledge, and you're going to do just fine. But I think a lot of times as humans, we have a problem with that, right? I don't know if we're hardwired or if our capitalist society just brings it out in us. But we are constantly looking left and right to see whether or not we have met some imaginary, self-imposed limit or line of where we think we're supposed to be, and then evaluate others based on that. I don't think Christ is a fan of that hyper-competitiveness, unless it's with yourself in service to the Lord. I don't know how that relates to sports. I don't think the Jewish community didn't have a lot of sports. They played kid games, but once you grew up in an agrarian society, what'd you do? Yeah, you went and fished or farmed. Not a lot of playtime that we can find. I'm sure the men played sports. You can't put 5 guys together without them coming up with some stupid game, right? Ladies? But you're not supposed to be competitive with your fellow Christians. It's enough for you to do what you are charged to do. Do that. How many of us have shied away from things the Lord asked us to do? That's a challenge question. You don't have to. And I get it. It's tough. I remember the struggle, is what I should say. And I struggle with it still. Pushing out the things that I might want to do that I know aren't part of what He wants me to do. Because I can clearly see what He wants me to do. His calls for my time are generally readily apparent. What about the guy with 5 talents? Is he the hero of the story? What if I said no? Who's the hero of the story? Yes. Because he does everything we can possibly ask a king, a leader, a master, a boss to do. He's honest. He's fair. He's just. In Scripture, when you put all those three together, they fall up under the definition of righteous and righteousness in the eyes of the Lord. But back to the guy with 5 bags. How'd he do? How about if I put it this way? He did no better than the guy with 3. And that was perfectly fine, because both of them did what was required, to the limit that they were required to do it. So why does the Lord ask us to do these things? These are the follow-on questions. I think you understand the parable now, at least as I understand it. If you disagree, raise your hands. Mm-hmm. So why? This is how it works. This is your faith in action, displayed in words.
I think that He's wanting us to grow the kingdom, but we first have to grow ourselves. And I think there's an element of, if He gives you 2 gifts, which is what that's when Mill Geiger had, and He works with what He's got and improves it, then He gains for Himself more talents or gifts or abilities that are useful in the kingdom.
Yeah, I agree with the intent. I understand what you're saying.
And in his life.
Yeah,
But,
the parable doesn't say that he gets any more.
well, he earns it for the master. He gets 2 and then he earns
Yes,
2
but
for the
let me, so in case somebody gets that sideways, what she's not saying is that if I use a gift well, God's going to give me another.
right.
It's not what this says.
It's just it's kind of like a side effect of doing what you're supposed to do. You just benefit from it in ways. It's like I look at me young and think I wasn't very organized, but I had someone pushing me who was a more organized person. And over time, I've learned to do that. And so now when I have all the family over, for instance, or have some event or something to help with at church, I can see the big picture and do. So I've developed that talent, I guess.
Yes.
But
So
it was foreign to me.
You're right. Not exactly applicable, but correct.
Yeah.
As we grow and we gain new skills, you should be expected to put them also in work for the Lord. But if you use a skill for the Lord, that doesn't mean He's going to give me a one-up and I'm going to unlock a new skill.
Right.
Not the
Like
way
I
that
said,
works.
it's just a side
It
benefit.
is a side benefit.
Yeah.
The more you work in finance and gain money, the more money you gain. All right.
This parable reminds me kind of the song, This Little Light of Mine. That's kind of what I think of. It's, the third guy hid his under the bushel, and the other two did not.
Okay. Yes, you're supposed to use them. Absolutely. What's missing from this part of the parable, because remember, the audience is the apostles. They either already know or are very shortly about to know what gifts they have specifically been given. How far is it until the Spirit comes down on them? How many days? 30-ish? In 30 days, they're going to be visited by the Spirit, and it's going to tell them, this is personal opinion, I don't know how else it worked, what they were going to do for the Lord. And Christ tells them previously, if you tell somebody to be healed, they're healed. If you tell somebody to walk, they walk. If you tell a demon to get out, it's going to get out. These are the things that I tell you you can do in my name. And he tells Paul, all things are given to you. The keys to the kingdom of heaven. So he knows, Christ knows that they're going to know. Once that remembrance of all the things he's told them is unlocked in their head, and it all falls into place suddenly. But this doesn't do that for us. You got to find your gifts. You got to find your skill sets. You've got to find the ways in which you can be an active member of the body. And that's probably the best example drawn from other scriptures. You're supposed to be a healthy part of a body, right? Somebody's a big toe. A big toe is pretty important. You ever seen anybody without one? You walk kind of clubby. Because that toe balances you in ways you never realized until it's gone. So your first task, and remember this is all post-baptism. You understand your position and role with Christ, and you are in the church, and you are actively seeking to become a member of the body in an active way. What is your skill? Hard soul-searching thing to answer.
It's going to require you to examine yourself, which a lot of people are afraid to look into the mirror.
It hurts.
And once you do that examination, you need to learn from that and be able to develop or try to develop into the area that you find yourself lacking in.
We all have strengths. Not everybody's required to speak. Not everybody is required to teach. All are required to be a healthy part of the body and participate and support through whatever activities are available. But you're right. Deconstructing yourself and then handing that over to the Lord is a tough business. But I strongly recommend it to every Christian. And you're not left to do that on your own. This is why you have Proverbs and Psalms. They're there to help. Nothing will show you more about how you're supposed to be as a human being and how you are supposed to react to God about it throughout all things in your life than those two books.
Yeah, when we talk about the person with 5 bags and 2 bags are just as good, so to speak, that gives me hope because I'm not going to be a person, who knows what will happen, but right now I'm not a person that's going to be a missionary and travel around the world and do all this. I'm more of an average Joe, but I can still make a difference with my 2 bags of gold versus...
Yeah. So there's a struggle inherent in that, right? We often want gifts other than the ones we're given. Everybody wants to look different than they look. I don't know why. You all look in the mirror and you want to be somebody else. I'm a little selfish. I kind of love the way God made me. It's grown on me. And that's all part of stopping or learning not to fight the Lord about who you are and how you're made. And then you have to give that gift over to the Lord and use it which can cause some consternation, frustration, fear, anxiety, all that stuff manifests. You haven't seen anyone more nervous in this building every Sunday morning than the man who's speaking up here. It's a common topic amongst the speakers. Because if you're new at it, you need to know that those of us who are old at it feel it too, one. And two, it's okay. It means you're concerned about whether or not you're going to deliver the Lord's word right. And you should be concerned. You should be comfortable in your knowledge and your understanding of your lesson. And then nervous the minute you get up here. And it's okay. But they're learning to use a gift. And you have to learn to find and use your gifts. Being able to run that booth is a gift. And I'm using gift too often. Because again, that is what we're brought up to translate this into. It should be skill set. Or a thing I can do. Learning how to organize, manage, and run one of the things that we do is a skill. Intuitively seeing that somebody is in trouble and we need to provide support and assistance is a skill. And if I were to be frank and honest about it, I think that the women in the congregation surpass the men in that skill. Because they're constantly coming to us and saying, hey, we're going to do this for this person. Yes, we are. There was one last part about what you said, Elizabeth. I'm trying to recall it, but I wanted to touch on it. So roll everything back that you said this last time. You don't have it? Yeah, I am. I don't often lose a thread in public speaking, but I have.
About developing a skill set?
Think.
And it's a side benefit.
Maybe. So don't be afraid.
You don't have to like that you're doing it. It's just that you know that you can and it needs to be done,
Yes.
so you do it.
Thank you. That triggered me.
You can get weary in well-doing in situations. But if you practice something and work at it, you can develop a new skill set. And it does have a benefit across your life.
The worst position you ever want to find yourself in is fighting yourself for the Lord or against the Lord. I know a lot of people who deny their skill sets.
Is that the burying it in the ground thing?
It is. So, if you've got an obvious skill set in your, and I'm gonna, you're outside the church life, and that's a bad terminology, but we'll say you're a banker. If you're a banker, then that's a skill, and you can use that on behalf of the church too, right? We expect that maybe we can put you in charge of a little bit of the finance or financing or that kind of stuff. And so, just because it's what you do on your daily life doesn't mean it's not applicable to the church.
I think it's important to remember that the Holy Spirit is also empowering us. So it doesn't necessarily matter what you do outside of the church. You can do something totally different for God, and with the Holy Spirit empowering you, you can do amazing things with it. Let God lead the way.
Yes. So thank you for bringing the Spirit into the discussion. We need to run a class on that again, as we do every 3 to 4 years, because you should never discount the power of the Spirit in your life. If ever you get a constant nagging in the back of your mind that feels like somebody is pushing you to do something that's it's outside your comfort zone, in the scary places for the Lord, maybe the Spirit working on your heart. I find that most of the things the Lord asks me to do require a sacrifice on my part. And that parallels the sacrifice on His. He's only asked me to give up some time, some energy, some effort, some money, if I'm capable and able. What did Christ give up for us? Just His life. That's the least you could say about it, right? Just a life. And so, however much you value yourself, would you die for yourself? I know that sounds really counterintuitive. How does that work? It's the same conversation that Christ had about being born of water with some members of the Jewish community. Because it doesn't seem to really make any sense, but it's very apropos and applicable. Somebody said you can have everything you want. All you got to do is die. Would you do it? That's what Christ did for you. And that's why his sacrifice is important. If you want to personalize it, I highly support that. He did it because of you. You absolutely required it. Any other questions or comments about Matthew 25, 14 through 30? Bags of gold. So it's a do something parable. That's how I'll close for consideration throughout your week. What are you going to do in your relationship with Christ? Because the answers are now in front of you. You can absolutely choose to be, what we jokingly call a pew warmer. You sit here every Sunday, look like a vital part of the community, and provide no value added. You are the guy with one talent or one bag of gold. In this parable only, Ray Fuller did not just say that the Lord's going to eject you utterly into the night. Not my place, not my decision. But in the parable, that's who you would be. I think we would all prefer to be the first or second person. Take those things that we can do in service of the Lord and do them. And when you choose to do one thing, usually you choose not to do another. And so the Lord's asking you where your effort and energy are being placed. And he wants them to be placed in support of the kingdom. Okay, 3 minutes early. I yield back 3 minutes of your time. 2 minutes early now. I yield back 2 minutes of your time. Thank you for your time.